Hey, Samuel.
Hello, Tim. I use a communication device to communicate and have pre-programmed questions for the interview in advance. I can also speak, but it takes a lot of energy and it can be hard to understand me. Feel free to ask me to repeat myself if you do not understand me.
Okay, got it. Will do.
What is your current role with the Concord Monitor and what are your main responsibilities?
Well, that's an interesting question. To the bottom of my emails, it still says sports editor, and I guess I really am that. But as you know, there's not been a lot of sports going on. So kind of since COVID, I've been more of a general news reporter, I would say. But, whenever sports stories come up, I'm the one responsible for them. Been covering, high schools returning to play has been a big story. So, yeah, kind of a general reporter. And if there's any sports-ish stories that come up, I am the sports editor, but I'm assuming I'm going to be going back to being sports editor pretty soon. Looks like high school sports will be returning in New Hampshire. At least that's the plan.
How long have you worked for the Concord Monitor?
I started at the Monitor in June of 2003, so 17 years.
What kind of sports do you cover?
Oh, I cover all kinds of sports, which is one of the reasons that I've enjoyed this job. So I cover everything from soccer to lacrosse, baseball, basketball, all of it, all levels, boys, girls, youth sports, pro sports sometimes, but not as much. So yeah, really pretty much anything. If there's any kind of event going on in Concord, I will cover it.
How did you begin your career?
That's a good question. So I have always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't get into sports writing or working in newspapers until I was older, in my late 20s. And I just sort of finally, honestly, I bumped into a guy playing basketball who worked at a weekly paper in Portland, Maine, the Portland Phoenix. And he said, yes, we need, hey, we need writers. Are you a writer? He and I had struck up a conversation, and honestly, that's how it began. And I kind of got the bug for it. And then, I got my first full-time job in 2002 at the Journal Tribune, which was in Biddeford, Maine. So just sort of, I always loved writing. I always loved sports. And I finally put two and two together in my late 20s, and I've been at it ever since.
What was your previous experience prior to working for the What was your previous experience prior to working for the Concord Monitor?
Well, yeah, just hit on it a little bit. Working for that Portland Phoenix, that was the first time I ever got paid to be a writer. And I did go there. They sort of hired me to be the offbeat sports writer. So I wrote some fun stories for them, like guys that were racing the cars they drove to work around a parking lot, doing crazy stuff like that. And then from there, I got a job at, like I said, the Journal Tribune, which was in Biddeford, Maine. And I also started working, there's a website, hoopshype.com, which is a pretty big website now. And I was writing columns for them when it first began back in 2003. And those Hoops Hype columns, plus my experience at the Journal Tribune, they helped me get a job at the Monitor. So I didn't have a ton of experience working in journalism before I started at the Monitor.
What kind of challenges do you experience in your position?
Well, definitely lots of challenges, and they have changed dramatically over the years. I mean, obviously, we're experiencing the COVID challenges right now, but I'll leave that alone. But before that, really, the challenges are of newspapers shrinking, losing money, and therefore losing staff. So really that has been the biggest challenge for the last couple of years, is how do you try to produce a quality newspaper with less resources? And that gets really especially challenging in the sports department when you're talking about trying to produce a sports section on deadline, where there are games happening at night and you have a very limited amount of time. In the past, we were able to solve that problem with a lot of manpower, a lot of people, and we just simply don't have the part-time staff, the full-time staff that we used to have. So, those the last couple hours of the night can sometimes be crazy, and honestly, sometimes we just can't do as much. And the last year we had to cut our coverage area, simply because we were down to, our staff was so small, we couldn't, we just couldn't get out to cover all the schools that we used to. So we had to cut that down a little bit. So yeah, those have been the biggest challenges for sure.
What was your most memorable moment as the sports editor of the Monitor?
I would probably, my most memorable moment, I guess, would be, being in the Boston Garden when the Celtics won their last championship in 2008. I don't know if that's my favorite thing, but that's just what kind of popped right into my head. That's, I was able to get on the floor and there was confetti falling, or I guess it had already fallen, but it was, the parquet was covered with confetti, and kind of got to be around the guys right around their locker room as they were celebrating, and that, seeing Kevin Garnett up close celebrating his first championship was pretty memorable.
What is your favorite part of your job?
There we go. That's a good follow-up question to that most memorable part, because I figured you were going to ask that, Samuel. I was watching the other sit downs, and so I was thinking about it, and there's kind of a couple of things that are my favorite parts, and I guess two of them are tied for the top. And the first one is that it's really allowed me to become part of the community. And I didn't seek that out when I got this job. I didn't expect that to happen, but it just did. And I think it's because when you're at a smaller paper like the Monitor, what we're doing mostly is covering high school sports. And so, you are in the stands with parents or with teachers or athletic directors. You're writing stories about people that their children, or kids that go to school with your kids, or and it just, the more, and I've been in Concord so long now, and I've been going to these games for so long, and know so many of these people, and I just really feel like it's allowed me to become a part of the community. I get to help tell the story of Concord, New Hampshire, and and I get to be a little bit of a part of that story, and that to me has been really rewarding, and really it's an unexpected reward. I should have known, or if I had thought about it, maybe I would have figured it out, but it's been great. And the other thing is I get to be a writer. That's number two. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a writer, and to get to do the thing that you always wanted to do is pretty special. So whenever I get a little grumpy about my job, which happens every now and again, I remind myself I get to do what I really love to do for a living. So it's those two things. And honestly, seeing stuff like the Celtics and going to big, Patriots games, that's kind of second on the list. That's fun, but really the two things are that I love the most. My favorite parts of the job are being part of the community, and I get to call myself a writer.
How has COVID-19 impacted your work and life?
Yeah, so I guess we talked about that a little bit, where it's sort of, it stopped sports. So that really changed a huge part of my work. And the truth is, at first, I still am enjoying writing about other things other than sports. I've been writing about sports for so long. It's nice to have a new challenge or just think about different things. So I feel like that's almost been a little bit of a positive silver lining impact, as well as I get to work during the day now. I work 8 to 4 is my schedule, whereas before, as the sports editor, was 4 to 12. I'd work until midnight. And so That got tiring after a while. So I kind of like working during the days. So those are, again, a couple of silver linings. But I'm always working from home. We're not in the office, so we don't get that camaraderie. I don't get to go out and be and covering things, being present, watching people do whatever it is they're doing, whether it's playing sports or doing their job or, things that we would be writing about. It's, I can do it talking to people over the phone and doing interviews. And that's basically mostly what I've been doing. But, it is challenging to not be able to be somewhere, to look somebody in the eye, to watch them do what they do, and then have to write a story about that. So yeah, it's definitely turned things upside down. But I feel like I've enjoyed it to a degree. I've tried to, again, find the silver linings in it, and I am proud of the Monitor and the people that work there. I feel like we've done a good job sort of, dealing with all the challenges and still putting out a newspaper at a time when it's important to put out, a quality newspaper.
Are you working from home now due to COVID-19? And if so, how has your position changed due to working from home?
Yeah, so I am working from home. I have been out the last couple of weeks. Like, there have been some youth baseball leagues happening around New Hampshire, and I have gone to some of those games. But yeah, working from home, again, a lot of time on the phone, a lot of long phone interviews, which, you get used to doing. Previously, I did a lot of that before, but, definitely a lot more of it now. I have been having trouble with my internet connection, so that's really tough for working at home. So there are these little difficulties that come up, things like that, and also, and frankly, just so when I'm done with work, and then I don't get to go home because I'm just home. I know a lot of people are dealing with that right now, but it is kind of weird to be just in the same building all day long. But just as far as the work itself, I do feel like we're pretty lucky in that I can make phone calls and I can write from home. And so really, we can work from home and produce quality stories in a quality newspaper. Remotely.
What did a typical day look like for you before COVID-19, and what does a typical work day look like for you now?
Yeah, so before, like I said, it was 4 to 12 would be a typical shift, and we depending on the season, but yeah, I would go in the office and get a few things done early in terms of trying to set up the section and make plans, and then you start getting emails and sometimes phone calls, mostly emails now, from coaches, local coaches, and as you start to put those games in the newspaper. Or if there are no games that day, then it's an easier day, and I'll be working on some sort of story. And honestly, before COVID, I would work from home. If there were, again, on a day that maybe there were no games happening, or a Saturday or something like that, in the summer. So I would just be working from home, writing stories and making phone calls. So in some, we were sort of prepared to do this. So. That's Mike. I don't think I really had a typical work day before. We would have a few certain kinds of typical days. And now my typical day is working from home, taking phone calls, making phone calls. So it is actually a lot more typical now than it was pre-COVID. So I'll say that my routine is more routine.
What do you think about major college football conferences, such as the Big Ten and Pac-12, not playing football in the fall?
I think it makes sense, to be honest with you. I just think there are too many variables when you're dealing with college kids, both on the team and potentially on campus and in the stands. I'm worried about what it might do to some of those athletic programs at the big conferences, but also at smaller schools, even smaller Division I schools like UNH. There's the football programs generate so much money for schools that I know it's going to create some financial hardships, and I do worry that people will start losing jobs in sports. And that's a tough thing. All that being said, I think it's the right decision. I think, this coronavirus is really, it's difficult, and that we've all had to do things we don't want to do. And I know people are losing patience with that, but I think we need to keep doing it for a little while. And so I think it's the right decision. I'll miss it. I'm not a huge I'll miss UNH football a lot more than I'll miss Penn State football or, any other college football. But, I have missed sports. I will miss those sports when the fall rolls around, but in the end, I think it's the right thing.
What do you think about the bubble system that is used for the NBA, and what do you think it would be like to be a journalist living and working in the bubble environment with players, coaches, and other personnel?
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that. I've been listening to podcasts with guys inside the bubble, and honestly, I don't think I'd like it. I might enjoy it for a week, a couple weeks, but oh man, I don't think I'd want to be there for 3 or 4 months. That being said, I've loved watching the games. I love how they're on. Like, you can watch NBA games all day long. It feels kind of like March Madness or something, where you can just start watching basketball at noon or 1 o'clock and it doesn't end. So I've enjoyed watching it. I've enjoyed watching it, and the Celtics have looked great. So that's an extra bonus, even though until Gordon Hayward's injury last night, but that's all right. I think they can still overcome. So I'm excited for a nice long Celtics playoff run. But I would not want to be in the bubble. No, thank you.
How successful do you think the NFL will be in terms of navigating COVID-19?
I'm worried about that too, because they really can't have a bubble. There's so many players. I just feel like there will probably be a lot more positive tests. I have a feeling it'll be closer to baseball in terms of there will be teams that it spreads through, as opposed to the NBA, where it's been really. I don't even think there have been any positive tests, and I think that I think the overall play will suffer. And just look at the Patriots alone already. They're one of the most in the league, but they've 5 or 6 guys have opted out, and then I think guys are going to test positive, and so they'll have to sit down. And I don't think there'll be a shortage of replacement players. I think there will be plenty of guys willing to step up and give it their all. But I'm not as confident. I'm not so confident that the NFL will be able to duplicate the NBA success. Again, my guess is it'll be closer to kind of the rocky start that we've seen for Major League Baseball. I mean, I hope it goes great. I hope nobody gets it. I hope the NFL is successful and safe and all that. But if I had to bet, I would say it's I bet they have some challenges.
Local schools, such as Concord High School, have announced that they are canceling sports in the fall. What kind of impact do you think canceling sporting events will have locally?
Yeah, so I guess you probably prepared that question maybe a few days ago, Samuel, and the Concord School Board did have a meeting on Monday, and they've reversed their course, and they decided to go ahead with local sports. One of the things that they did mention at the meeting was each school will determine whether or not they can have fans at the games. And Concord High Athletic Director Steve Mello said right now they're leaning towards only family members and media at the game. So, I mean, that could be a pretty big impact when you're talking about like Friday night football games. And that's a social event for a lot of kids, a lot of people, and they're not going to be allowed there. So I guess, I'm glad that the kids will be able to play as long as we can keep everything safe, as the schools can keep everything safe and people follow the guidelines. But I do think, just not being able to go watch the games, even a soccer game maybe, or, there are other stuff that people like to go check out. That will have something of an impact on the community. And, who knows if we have to, if if they have to change course again and shut everything down, and then kids aren't going to have that opportunity to socialize through sports, that's going to be really hard on people as well. But they may have to do it just for safety reasons. So, I think it's TBD. I know it had a really hard effect at the end of the winter season and missing the spring. Like a lot of kids who had to miss their senior seasons for baseball and softball and lacrosse and things like that. It just was, it's heartbreaking. It really is. And people use that word all the time. And sometimes I think maybe that's a little overblown. We've all had to make sacrifices, but that in the moment, losing your senior season can feel like a lot. So hopefully things will be smoothed out. They'll be able to go forward with this plan, but I think the full effect still really, to be determined.
Thanks, Tim, for that interview. It was great speaking with you. Could you send me a picture of you as the sports editor of the Concord Monitor? I will use it when my interview gets published for the Monitor.
Absolutely. Samuel, nice speaking with you. Thank you for doing this for us. I appreciate it. And yes, I will send you a picture right away.
Thanks again.
Thanks, man. See ya.